So about a week ago, I started going through some of my old notebooks that I use for studying Japanese. Now, I have so many different notebooks for so many different little things that they are all becoming just a little bit of a mess. Now, one of the notebooks in particular though had something in it that I hadn't actually looked at for about the past 4 years or so. Now, I was actually sort of tossing up on whether or not I actually wanted to make this video because it is a little bit awkward, to be perfectly honest. So the reason why it's a little bit awkward is because this is just something I wrote down purely just for myself. No one else was really meant to look at it, it was really just for me. So in this notebook, I had written down a 10-year plan. I had heard from a lot of other people online that they had a lot of success with their goals when sort of coming up with a long-term strategy and writing down like a 5 or 10-year plan and sort of trying to stick to that as best as you can. Now, the unfortunate thing is with this 10-year plan that I wrote down, and as I said, I haven't looked at it in about 4 years or so. I wrote it down just after me and my wife got back from Japan in around November or December of 2019, and that was actually the trip that we had where we got married over there. Now, what I didn't know was going to happen just a few months after writing down this 10-year plan was COVID, which changed everything. So in an ideal world, this plan hopefully would have been much easier to accomplish, but since COVID, I feel that almost nothing on this plan has really come to fruition over the past 4 years. So with this 10-year plan, I did break it down a little bit into a 6-month plan, a 1-year plan, a 2-year plan, a 5-year plan, and a 10-year plan. And as I said, I haven't looked at any of it. So I did want to go through this 10-year plan step by step today and sort of see what I have accomplished, if anything, and what has changed since then. Now, before I get into it, I did want to quickly mention just how much of an impact COVID had on my 10-year plan. So when COVID hit, it was probably about 3 months after I'd actually written down this 10-year plan, which means I was about halfway through the 6-month portion of it. Now, shortly after COVID, I did actually get retrenched from my job at the time. So that meant that I had to find a new job. And in COVID, that was not the easiest thing to do, unfortunately. So pretty much right from the get-go, that did put a pretty big damper on my 10-year plan. Now, just having to try and find a new job wasn't the only thing that really impacted my 10-year plan at that time. So about 2 years after COVID started, my dad actually unfortunately passed away. It wasn't actually related to COVID, it was due to other health reasons, but yeah, that did have a fairly big impact on my life at that time. So that happened in 2022, and I haven't really thought about much of my goals ever since then, to be perfectly honest. So yeah, that's why I kind of wanted to have a look back on this 10-year plan that I originally wrote down to see how much things have changed since I wrote it down and whether or not I've actually completed anything on it. So starting off with the 6-month portion of my 10-year plan. Now, just looking at this one, I can definitely say that it's not really as bad as I thought. So my 6-month portion of my plan was actually quite simple, and it makes sense. I didn't really have a whole lot of time to get it all together. So the first thing on my to-do list for my 6-month plan was to create an aesthetic work and study space. So basically, back then, my desk was very plain and it was very boring and it was ugly. I didn't like it and it didn't make me want to actually sit at my desk and study. So I kind of had the idea in my head that I really wanted to create an environment where I actually enjoyed sitting down and studying for the day. And I kind of was at this point where I would look at a lot of people's desk setups online and I was very jealous and I wanted to kind of build my own sort of little study space. Now, what I've got is not bad by any means. I definitely do have a few things that I would like to improve on it, but I'm actually really happy with how it looks now in comparison to how it did before. The one thing I will say is though, if you're ever thinking about getting a felt desk mat for your study space, if you have a cat, be aware you will have cat fur knotted up in that desk mat, I guarantee it. My desk mat is just full of cat fur, and if I'm wearing a t-shirt, when I'm moving my mouse along or writing, I can actually feel the cat fur on my arm, and it is a little bit distracting. So I would recommend against a felt desk mat if you have a cat. Now, the next thing on my 6-month plan was to create a Study With Me YouTube channel. Now, I actually did create a Study With Me YouTube channel. In fact, I created one around that time, but I pretty much stopped not long after because of everything that was going on. And I ended up starting up a new one about a year ago now, and it's been a bit slow, but I do enjoy it, and it sort of forces me to stay a little bit consistent. So yeah, that's definitely another thing I can say that I can tick off my 6-month plan. Now the next thing I have down here is to build a productive work and study routine. Now, because I work from home, it is fairly easy to build a work routine. I don't actually have to go anywhere to do anything, which is really good, and it does help out a lot with my studies as well. And I actually do have a really good study routine going, and it has been for the past probably 2 to 3 months now. It's been going really, really well. So yeah, although it's a bit late, it is still something that I can say I've definitely now finally accomplished. Now, unfortunately, with this 6-month plan, that's pretty much the end of the things that I was actually able to accomplish. There was only 2 other things that I had on my 6-month plan. One of those was to start studying towards a university bridging program. For as long as I can remember, I've always known that I wanted to go to university. Unfortunately, coming out of year 12, I didn't really have a high enough score to get into university at the time. And it has been something that has kind of stuck in the back of my mind ever since then. It's something that I've always wanted to accomplish. So yeah, it was pretty obvious that that was going to be on my 6-month plan, was to start finally working towards that goal. I know it's a bit late in my life to really start thinking about university, but it's definitely one of those things that I don't really think I'll ever get over wanting to do. Studying was not really something that was a very high priority in my family. So in my family, it was always very much encouraged to basically start working as soon as possible. Education didn't matter. What really mattered was making money as soon as you can. So out of all of my siblings, I'm actually the only one that finished year 12. The rest of them all dropped out to start working as soon as possible. It was a little bit difficult growing up when it came to wanting to get an education, and studying was very difficult when I was younger. It was not something that my parents really sort of gave much thought about. My dad was a carpenter, so studying really wasn't something he did. He pretty much started working as soon as he could, and he stayed as a carpenter his whole life. There was definitely nothing that was ever gonna stop him from working. He just had that mindset where he had to provide no matter what. So pretty much the rest of my family all had a very similar sort of mindset. I was the exception though. I always had the idea in my head that it was better to get an education and go to university and work towards getting a job and a career that I actually want to do. The unfortunate thing with that was that because studying really wasn't something that was, it's really hard to, I don't know how to put it. Like, studying just wasn't something that my family did. So I never had help with any of that stuff growing up at home. In fact, I remember one occasion where I finally sat down to do some homework at the dining room table, and my mum just told me to put it away because, you know, it wasn't important, and, you know, we were about to sit down to dinner, so I shouldn't study. There's no point. It's pointless. Just do it at school. So yeah, studying at home just wasn't something that I did, and because of that, I feel like it did have a fairly large impact on my grades, which was one of the reasons why I didn't get into university coming straight out of high school. Anyway, that was a very long tangent. So yeah, studying towards a university bridging program to get into the course that I wanted, which at the time and still is something that I wanted to do, is doing a bachelor's degree in cultural studies. Now, the last thing on my list here, which I also haven't really completed, is getting in shape. Now, I wouldn't really say I'm extremely unfit, but I'm definitely not in shape in the way that I would want to be right now. So moving on, we now have the 1-year plan. Now, the first step on the 1-year plan was actually something that is still pretty okay right now, and it does sort of relate to some of the things in the 6-month plan, which is to have a well-managed study and work routine and YouTube channel. Now, obviously my YouTube channel is still relatively new, so I wouldn't say it's well managed by any means, but yeah, I am keeping up on top of my work and my studies, and I'm actively trying to do more with YouTube. So I would say that, yeah, I'm kind of there, maybe. The next one I haven't actually done, which is finish at least one Minna no Nihongo textbook. So that's a Japanese textbook, which I was thinking that I didn't really want to do because I didn't enjoy doing the sort of textbook style of studying Japanese, but recently I have been thinking about just doing it, just completing them because I have them and I might as well. I do have a lot of other ways that I'm studying Japanese right now, and adding in one extra one does mean that I'll have to do quite a bit more work. But I don't actually mind because I enjoy studying Japanese. It is something that is becoming really enjoyable for me. As of right now though, it's not done, which means I can't say that I've actually completed that. So this next step also does tie into part of the 6-month plan, which is to get into university and start studying Japanese in a more meaningful way. Basically, what I meant by that back then is the studying that I'm doing for Japanese right now is just for me. Whereas if I was to get into university and study Japanese through university, there would be a reason for it. There's a goal, there's something to accomplish. I mean, in saying that, I feel like I do still have something to accomplish just studying it on my own, and I do have the motivation to keep going, so it's definitely not a problem in that way. But doing it through university was definitely a very big goal that I had. Now, the reason why I put that in the 1-year plan is because if I started the bridging program in the 6-month plan, it only takes about 6 months to finish. So by the first year, I should have been in university and starting to move forward in that way. So yeah, that's definitely one of the more unfortunate goals that I didn't manage to accomplish. Now, the next one on this 1-year plan is to create a share investment portfolio. Now, this is actually something that I did start. It's not the best, but it's definitely there, and it's sort of, you know, just reoccurring dividends at the moment. But yeah, I can't really get too far into that one just because it's not something I've really sat down and do a whole lot of work with, but I did start, which is good. And the last one on this 1-year plan is to be physically and mentally fitter than I've ever been. And as I mentioned in the 6-month plan, where I mentioned that one of my goals was to get in shape, that's obviously something I haven't fully accomplished yet, but I am working on it. Now, continuing on, we move into the 2-year plan. Now, this one is definitely looking a lot worse than the 1-year plan just at a glance. Now, this first one, I've definitely not gotten there yet, but it does make sense because, I mean, even with starting this YouTube channel, I'm only about just under a year into it, I think now. And the first one on this list was to continue building the YouTube channel and hopefully be earning enough to go full-time with YouTube. Now, this was actually purely based off a Study With Me channel. At this point in time, I did not have any plans to create a channel like this. I didn't feel like I was the kind of person who could put myself out there and sort of film myself talking to a camera. Which actually means that maybe part of that 1-year plan where I said I was going to be mentally fitter than I've ever been, maybe that is getting better. Because yeah, back then I couldn't even consider the thought of me putting myself on camera like this. But definitely nowhere near that point of being able to go full-time with YouTube. It is actually something that I've wanted to discuss on my channel before, but yeah, I'll save that for another video. So obviously that one's not done. Now, with the second step of my 2-year plan, I've got be in university with a conversational understanding of Japanese. Now, they are obviously two things that I have not yet completed. I would definitely not say that my Japanese is at a conversational level, but it is steadily improving, which is great. I'm definitely not in university, obviously, no reason to go further into that one. That one's just obvious. Now, the third step is to read at least a few books in Japanese. Now, although I haven't read any books or novels in Japanese, I have read a lot of Japanese content on LinkU. So currently I'm at about 96,481 words read, going by sort of my statistics on LinkU, which I think is pretty good. But it's still not what my goal was. My goal was to actually read at least a few books, so I can definitely say I haven't done that. Now, the final step on my 2-year plan was something that me and my wife have actually accomplished together, which was to buy a house. I mean, we didn't actually buy a house, but we did buy an apartment, which is still a really huge investment, and it's still a massive goal for us. Now, buying this apartment was actually one of the reasons why I haven't started to consider going through that whole bridging program into university. The cost of living is extremely high here in Australia, and basically trying to pay the mortgage as well, it's very hard to justify bringing on another expense like the cost of university. In saying that, there is a system in Australia called help loans or HEX debt, which is basically a study loan that you can get for studying at university in Australia. Now, a lot of people do think it's just an amazing opportunity to be able to get those help loans, and I do too, but when paying a mortgage at the same time, it's very hard to still justify that additional expense, because what a lot of people don't really think about a whole lot with help loans is the indexation fees that accrue on them, which is basically interest. Now the interest here in Australia on these HECS loans is very, very high. 2 years ago, the help loan indexation that applied in that year was 7.1%, which is quite huge. This year, the one that applied to everybody's HECS debts was 4.3%, I think. I know a lot of people don't really think about these sort of things. Now, although it is a great opportunity, it is just something that me and my wife think about, you know, when you're paying so much for university already as it is, and then on top of that, you've got indexation. By the time you pay off some of these help loans, you're gonna end up spending a lot more money than you would have needed to. So when you're trying to manage a mortgage and living expenses, it is just one of those things that is hard to justify. But yeah, buying this apartment was definitely a huge goal, and I'm really glad that me and my wife were able to accomplish that one. Although it has had its fair share of headaches, but again, maybe I'll leave that for another video. Next up, we have the 5-year plan. And the 5-year plan is really just a continuation from the previous years, obviously. It's kind of just building on top of it. So by the 5-year plan, I was hoping to have finished university and found a career in Japan. Yeah, so basically I haven't read any of this, as I mentioned, for about 4 years. Now, moving to Japan is definitely something that I've always wanted to do ever since I was younger. I've never really felt much of a connection to Australia, and Japanese culture is definitely something that I had always had some level of interest in. Now, again, with having a mortgage on an apartment here in Australia, I really don't know if this is something that will ever be possible for me. It's still one of those things that I'll always dream of doing one day, just like going to university. But yeah, it's definitely something that is not accomplished. And I mean, that's 5 years, so still technically I've got a year before I need to accomplish that one, but I can definitely say it's most likely not gonna happen. Now, the next step on my 5-year plan was to have a well-managed YouTube account. And again, I'm still a year off it, but I really don't think I'll be at the point where I can go sort of full-time on YouTube, even though again, this is sort of just basing it off a study with me YouTube channel. Even with this one, I mean, I would love to, and I will continue going with YouTube regardless until I get to that point. Even if I don't, I'm still going to continue doing it, because really this channel is to sort of hold myself accountable for things and to look back and see how much I've grown. So it's fine. Now, the next step was to also become fluent in Japanese by that 5-year point. Again, I do still have a year to go. Who knows? Maybe I can achieve fluency in Japanese within the next year and 3 months or so, roughly. But yeah, it's definitely gonna take a lot of work, but I hope to accomplish it still, and maybe that one's still possible. Now, the last step on the 5-year plan was to start a 3rd language. So obviously, English being my first language, Japanese being my second language, and I do hope to start a 3rd language. I have no idea what just yet. I've always been a little bit interested in learning Chinese. I think it's an interesting language and also has a lot of opportunities, but I'm also kind of fascinated with the Korean language writing system. Apparently it's like super easy to learn, and I don't know, yeah, I kind of just find that interesting. And maybe that'll be a good sort of segue from Japanese, because the grammar, I believe, for Korean is very similar to Japanese, so maybe that might be a good one to go for. And that was it for the 5-year plan. So final one is 10 years, and I can definitely say that most of this stuff's probably not going to happen. I will still work towards it because I do still have time, but it's kind of unrealistic, these goals. I guess back when I wrote these down, I had much higher expectations of myself than I do right now, but anyway. So the first one on the 10-year plan list is to live happily in Japan with my dream job and my wife. So yeah, it's kind of cringy to read this now, and again, it's not something that I've spoken about to anyone, and I really just feel like it's more of a dream than it is a goal right now. I mean, maybe one day, but as of right now, it's not really something that I'm thinking too much about, even though it is one of those goals that I've always had and will probably always have for myself. It just doesn't seem realistic right now. Maybe. I've still got 6 years and 3 months roughly to accomplish that, so who knows, maybe. Now, the second one on my 10-year plan was to have learned at least 3 languages to fluency. So that obviously being English, which is obviously fine, it's my native language, Japanese, and at least 1 other language, possibly more. I mean, again, I've still got 6 years and 3 months roughly to accomplish that. So, I mean, it's pretty realistic, that one, to still accomplish, and it's one that I will actively work towards because I've always been a little bit fascinated with languages, and my YouTube channel feed and my TikTok, it's all just become flooded with language channels. I do have a very high interest in it. So yeah, maybe that one's still able to be accomplished. Now, Now the last one is to continue YouTube even if I have my dream job. So yeah, I never really wanted to sort of give up on having a YouTube channel. Even if I had my dream job, it's something that I would still want to do. Looking back on that 10-year plan definitely makes me really think about a lot of the things that I wanted and how much things have changed since then. It's unfortunate that a lot of those things just don't really seem as realistic now, just with all of the things that I've got going. Cost of living just being one of those things that's so high, and managing a mortgage is not the easiest thing to have to do. Yeah, it has caused things to change quite a bit, but it definitely does make me want to sit down and really think about those long-term goals again and what I want from now moving forward. I'm actually really glad that I did sit down and write that 10-year plan, even though it's a little bit eye-opening to see all of the things that I never actually got to accomplish, but that was really just down to bad timing. It was just a horrible, horrible time to actually create a 10-year plan right before COVID hit. It was really, really unfortunate. I do want to create another 5-year plan. I don't exactly know what I'll put on it. I do have to really sit down and think about the things that I want moving forwards. But yeah, that's pretty much all I really wanted to talk about today. It wasn't really as positive as I would have liked it to have been. I would have liked to have completed more on that list than I have by now. But a lot of that list was really to do with going to university and, you know, focusing on my Japanese studies, which at least the Japanese studies is getting better. I'm really happy with my progress at the moment, which is really great. I've still got some time before that 5-year plan to achieve fluency, so hopefully that will be possible, fingers crossed. But yeah, that's pretty much it for today's video. If you like this video, please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And if you have a 5-year plan, maybe leave it in the comment section below. It'd be great to hear what everybody else's goals are. Anyway, that's it for today. Thanks for watching.